This is Talking Devils, the leading independent Manchester United podcast. I'm your host, Wayne Barton, joined by former United Academy product Phil Marsh to talk over the summer and preview the Premier League season, which is upon us this weekend. If you're watching live on YouTube or Facebook, feel free to get your comments and questions in live. If you're watching the replay, say hello. Feel free to comment. We do reply to the comments. If you're listening back on the audio podcast, be sure to like and subscribe on the platform you're listening on. Phil, it's been a few weeks. How's it been for you?
Yeah, all good, mate. As I say, I'm finally out my cast now for those that have been following my injury updates. So I'm back on my feet. I'm sort of doing well with the physio, strengthening my leg up again. Couple of weeks away probably from getting back involved in some light training and stuff. But yeah, feeling good. Obviously looking forward to the start of the season. It's felt like a long time, especially, being cooped up and, not being able to do much myself. Really looking forward to the sort of football coming back. And yeah, really optimistic, looking forward to a good season ahead.
So not retired just yet?
Not quite. No, I'm still, I'm still hanging on in there just about. I'm hopeful that I can, have another year at least, maybe two, and keep going as long as I can. And I know I'll miss it when I finally do hang my boots up. So just want to keep going until my body sort of tells me that that's the end of the road.
James, leave a comment. He says, "Good to see you both. Well, lads, buzzing for Monday. Yes, us as well, I'm sure." And before I begin, I am going to be hocking a couple of books today. The first one we'll talk about is this one, United, Sir Alex and Me, is Rene Meullensteen's autobiography. Phil, you're actually mentioned in the book. Rene speaks about you. We speak about a number of the kids that he played with, particularly from that reserve side in 2006-07. Tell me a little bit about Rene as a coach. I'm not here to massively promote the book. I just give Rene a bit of a shout out in terms of what he was as a coach, what he contributed, any lessons that he left with you that that you carry with you.
Yeah, I mean, for me, Rene was probably, one of the best managers that I ever worked with. Just in terms of, his knowledge of the game, the way he sort of spoke to you, his detail and his attention to detail, should I say. I think for me personally, when I first joined the club and I came into the academy, I only briefly met Rene a few times. I think he was sort of someone who would dip in and out of different age groups and work on technical stuff, like your fast feet and just manipulating the ball and stuff. But really liked him from the sort of first time I met him. And then as I was lucky enough to sort of go through the ranks and went in full time, started to, see a lot more of him and work with him a little bit more. And just sort of, grew more fonder of him as time went by. I think he's, an exceptional coach. He knows, everything there is to know really about the game. He's worked with some of the best players in the world. Obviously, what he did with Cristiano, transformed his game and sort of, took him to the next level. But also did that with a lot of the younger players as well, who maybe never went on and hit the heights as much as Cristiano. But I think for me, I really had a massive respect with Rene because when I sort of got into the reserve team and he was managing, Rene was somebody who I sort of, always, if I ever had any problems, sometimes as a player, you feel as though you can't speak to your coach or your manager about certain things that you maybe feel a little bit unsure on or uncomfortable about. But for me, because of the way Rene was and the relationship that we had, I was, always open and really honest, and had, numerous occasions where I'd spoke to Rene about certain situations or certain parts of my game where I felt I could improve or that I wasn't maybe doing what he wanted. And, he took me to the next level and sort of, anytime I was unsure, he would certainly put your mind at ease. And as I say, not only a great coach, a great person, still keep in touch with Rene to this present day. And as I say, can't really speak much more highly of him. And his book, I'm sure, is going to be a great success. And I actually will look forward to reading that. I'm sure in the coming months.
Yeah, cheers for that, Phil. One thing that I got, and obviously I'm a fan. Like I know I write that I'm a fan first and foremost, and I love United like that. I don't think that's in any question. Hopefully, with the way that I speak about the club. But one thing that I got from working with Rene, and I hoped that this would be the case, but you can't always take it for granted, is that I would get a better understanding of what makes United tick, the mechanics behind everything, in terms of like the tactics, the philosophy on the training ground, how that manifests itself into game scenarios and everything like that. And not only did I get that, he broke it down in a way that was so accessible for me to understand from someone who's never played the game professionally, for him to sort of explain it in a way that made me completely connect with it. And obviously it was things that I could relate to as well, because I'm a United fan and I see and identify all these things, and I think, I wonder if that's the way it is. So for it to sort of explain a lot of it, and for it to be that way in many cases, and in other cases, sometimes it wasn't that way, but there was another explanation for it, and he would explain that. I'm just curious as that I'm like I say, I'm talking about me as a fan. Was that what it was like as a player for you? Like he was able to see pictures that make pictures on the pitch more clear and things like that.
100%, I think. And what a great trait that Rene had was, as I say, every player is different. So you can't, maybe what may work for one player might not work for another player. And I think Rene was such a good coach that he knew and that he could identify basically, ways of putting things across to different players, and making it make sense basically to everybody, but doing it in different ways. And he would always have time for collectively, but individually as well. And I think that's why we were so successful, and why a lot of players had a lot of respect for Rene in particular, because he took the time out and he would do extra. After training, he would go out and do stuff with you. He would always come and sit next to you in the canteen and just talk about, football and just, wanting to, basically find out more about, what your strengths and weaknesses were and how he could, help. And I think that was, what Rene was there for, what he did. And as we've seen, he's done it with, some of the best players around the world. And for me, he's a fantastic coach. And I think that boils down to having the full skill set. There's a lot of great coaches out there who are, technically very good and know all the, jargon to put across to the players, but also having the man management skills and being able to put it across to everybody in certain different ways is a skill that not everybody has, and Rene certainly had that. And as I say, he was a brilliant part of the club for the period that he was there.
Yeah, completely agree. And there will be people, and there are people still, saying that Rene should still be a part of the club. He's got a lot of knowledge about the club, and it'd be wise to pass that on. And I agree. He's obviously busy at the moment, but either way, if he does or doesn't become part of the club again in the future, one thing I can say about him is that his contribution to the club is extremely significant. And yes, I'm shilling the book a little bit, but it's worth a read. It really is, because it's fascinating the way that he talks about football, the way that he makes it easy to understand. Like I said, I finished writing it and thinking, do you know what? I might fancy trying to be a coach. I've scratched that itch. I'm going to do that. I'll focus on writing books about it anyway. But most people will probably come away, especially if you're a bit younger than me, or if you've got an inclination of wanting to get into coaching, you probably read it and think, you know what, I could probably try and implement some of that United style. But like I said, so much about that is about the articulation. You will know this from your own kind of background, well, not even background, what you're currently doing, working with the kids and stuff like that. It is all about teaching, is all about the articulation of that message. And that's obviously something that comes in a variety of different ways. And it's not really about your ability to articulate that message. It's about your ability to articulate it in a number of different ways that different people can access it, and that's where the success of a great teacher or trainer comes in, like Rene. So yeah.
Just off the back of that as well, Wayne. Just one obviously story that I would want to share as well with you. You'll probably know this, but at the time as well when I was in the reserves, Rene was the manager, and we had quite a few injuries. Obviously, I was a striker or a forward attacking player. We had quite a lot of injuries at this moment in time, and Rene actually pulled me and asked me at this particular point, would I mind playing right back and going playing as a defender? Now, for me, depending on who that had came from, it would have been probably a completely different answer. I got asked by Rene, and the way he put it across to me was, not can you just come and play right back because we've not got no players. He put it across to me as, listen, he said, we've obviously got players out and players missing, but I think that you've got the skill set that you can come into that role and just as a sort of stopgap play in that position, because I think you're quick, you're good with the ball, you can ping it, you can get up and down. And because of the way he put it across to me, I sort of didn't really sort of give it a second thought. I just thought, you know what? Yeah, I'll go with it. I respect Rene, and if he thinks I can do it, I'm going to give it a shot. And for me, obviously, I was a little bit anxious because obviously being an attacking player, I'd been attacking all my sort of career. I'd never really played in a defensive capacity. I was a little bit worried at, my defensive cover and where I should be at certain times and maybe being exposed a little bit 1v1. But because the way Rene was and sort of the players he had around me as well, I had good players. I was playing with, Paul McShea and Johnny Evans, good lads who would, help you out with that and sort of, advise you and encourage you. But that little story is sort of just highlighting again of how much of a respect and sort of the way Rene had that, mentality of putting things across to players that, even in something that I probably wouldn't have, wanted to do or felt comfortable doing, because of the way he was with everybody really as players and the way he managed everybody, that I sort of stepped into that role and sort of did really well. And, I remember actually my first game, I got man of the match against Leeds, played right back and played really well. And he sort of, instilled even more confidence in me, and I sort of did that role for a few months until some of the players ended up coming back. And again, that was another part of my career where I look, I've played in a different position there. I've learned the game a little bit more. I've seen a different side to the game. Obviously, being used to playing with your back to goal and sort of as a centre forward, now I'm playing, with the pitch all in front of you, different ideas, different challenges. And as I say, that's been a great, little learning curve for me and seeing a different perspective and position. And that was obviously thanks to Rene and having that trust and belief in me to do it.
Yeah, Rene, good man, great coach. Let's move on to what we're talking about this week. It's the opening weekend of the Premier League season. As you know, we're usually with Lee on Friday nights. Not here today, so it makes the job of picking the thing for the topic for our next topic a little bit easier, or our choice from the next topic, I should say. So I think we did this at the start of last season, but it's always good to refresh it. I can't remember. I'm trying to think. Oh yeah, the first day of last season was Brighton at home. I don't think that's going to make it onto the list. But our best opening day in Premier League history. Thought we'd have a bit of a topic with this, and like I said, Lee's not here, so his choice is null and void. And I'm not going to go first and pick it from you, Phil. So when you're thinking about the best Premier League opening weekend in a Manchester United context, what's the best one? What's the first one that springs to mind for you?
As I say, we have all spoke about this off air, and for me, it was a no-brainer. 96, that was the year that I was lucky enough to join the club. I was 11, that was when I got picked up. So prior to that, I never really supported anyone as such. I love football. I started playing a little bit more. I played for Wigan Athletic. I obviously followed the Premier League and stuff. But then obviously joining Man United at the age of 11, and getting all the kit and feeling part of it, that was sort of me, signing myself up there to be a Man United fan moving forward. And obviously in '96, watching that opening game, David Beckham, the iconic goal against Wimbledon from the halfway line. I think that for me was a goal that sort of is still played to this day, and rightly so, because of the technical ability, the awareness. And yeah, I think, for me, as I said, it was, I just joined the club. It was an iconic goal. I just sort of, started following the club as a proper supporter, if you like. I just sort of probably got me first Merlin Premier League book, which I used to love collecting the stickers for in school. So yeah, I just think that goal and being me the first sort of year at the club and everything that came with it, I think scoring a goal of that magnitude and the way that sort of Beckham sort of catapulted his career on all fronts really after that goal, and being lucky enough to sort of see some of them players, your Coles, your Beckhams, and all the younger players, class of '92, were breaking through at that point. It was outstanding and a goal that obviously sticks out for me more than most.
Yeah, I can remember the couple of other goals. Cantonal's goal in that game was pretty good. At the start, he takes it down, leathers it in, and then Irwin's the other goal, isn't he? He scores from the angle.
Yeah.
And I think that was 2-0, thinking that's it. And that would have been good enough then. But yeah, Beckham, when I was doing the research for the book on Beckham, obviously I spoke to you about it as well. I think I must have spoken to you about it. But there was the goal that he scored against, I think it was Bury in the reserves a couple of years earlier, where he done it from the halfway line. And so no one from that kind of group was surprised he'd done something like that. It was the kind of thing that he would do. But to do it on the Premier League stage. And at that time, '96, I think Pele had tried to do it in the '70 World Cup and it hadn't come off. And I know since then, there's probably been 3 or 4. Charlie Adam did one, Xabi Alonso, and I know probably a couple of others. But there's nothing quite like that first one, is there? It's the execution as well. The arrogance to try it and the clean strike on the ball, and for it to go in before it bounces and everything like that. The aesthetic of the goal still makes it the best.
Do you know what I actually found funny about that goal as well? I only sort of realised a couple of years later was when he scores the goal, he celebrates with Brian McClure, doesn't he? And then years later, because obviously when I ended up going full time, obviously Brian McClure was my coach and in the reserves and stuff. And then I never actually realised that until years later, and I ended up seeing it like a couple of years later, and I was like, "Oh my God, Chuck, he's actually like still play." Because I, being a young kid then, obviously not knowing how late McClure played up until, it was just funny seeing it and watching it back and thinking, Chucky was in there with one of the Premier League's probably greatest goals.
Yeah, I don't know if you ever talked to him about it. He claimed the assist for that because he lays the ball off to Beckham. And he also, there's a later goal that season, Sunderland, the Cantona chip against Sunderland, and McClure took that one up to the top as well. Yeah. And then he makes the joke that the 2 greatest assists in Premier League history. He got a point, to be fair. Robbie says he remembers the 4-0 against Chelsea, which is 2019-20. Yeah, do you know what? That slipped all from my mind, but that was a great day. That was just after Ollie had signed the 3 players, and Dan James scored from the bench, and Pogba was electric in that game. I remember Rashford was brilliant as well. Just thought this was a different kind of United, but unfortunately, a bit of a false dawn with that. There was other choices. I think Lee was going with the Leeds one, wasn't he? The 5-1, where Rafa Varane was paraded before the game. And I was thinking as well that there are some others. I mean, even the ones we didn't win are memorable in a way. There's the Beckham goal from Villa Park, where, and a year earlier, Yes, we lost 3-1, but that was the you can't win anything with kids game, and everyone can remember that for a multitude of reasons. And the defeat doesn't sting as bad, really, because we had gone to win the league, and it's so iconic in what it went on to represent. And then there's another Beckham goal before right at the start of the 98-99 season when we were 2-0 down, and he scored. He was getting loads of stick after the World Cup and everything like that. There was a game where I think Van Nistelrooy's debut against Fulham, he scored a couple of goals against Van der Sar, of all goalkeepers. And other than that, was it just after Beckham left, Ronaldo's debut, which was very memorable for different reasons. Well, I think it was Bolton, we beat 4-0 or something, 3-0. 3 or 4-0. Giggs scored a free kick, I remember, because they were saying it's the first free kick after Beckham and all that sort of stuff. Beckham features quite heavily, as you can tell, in all of these. Maybe even Beckham. Beckham might have scored a free kick in the Fulham game where Van Nistelrooy. I think he did. Robbie says we backed 4-0, Bolton 4-0. I think that's the Ronaldo one that I'm thinking of.
Yeah.
I think it is anyway. I might be wrong. Jay said, "How are you guys doing? Hope you're all right, Jay." There's in this case window, I feel fine as we are right since we'll get to the transfers in a moment. Just close on the opening day things. I think my favourite of this selection from the Premier League, although I like 93-94 because I liked winning against Norwich because I think Robbo and Giggs scored in that game. Was it right? It might have been Robbo. I'm sure it was. Giggs scored anyway. I remember just like feeling buzzing because we were on a run of wins, and it was good to start that season after we'd won the league. We started the season well after being so terrible the start of the previous one. But the one that I picked out for my favourite was the 5-1 after the 2006 World Cup against Fulham. And I don't know if you remember, Phil, but you will. You were there. You were definitely at the club at the time. And that was the Ronaldo Rooney kind of thing after the World Cup. They were saying, are they going to get on? All the speculation was that Ronaldo was going to leave over the summer. Fergie quickly put that one to bed and said, it's nonsense, they're going to play. But everyone was still wondering, how are they going to get on? And in the first game, they were unbelievable for that first 20 minutes. And we were like,
after 20 minutes, weren't we? Something like that.
Yeah, it was definitely 4 by half time. We absolutely destroyed them. It was unbelievable football in that first half. And I remember thinking that even then, because we started seasons quite slowly in those days, and Fergie was kind of like, I really want to get the start right because Chelsea had changed the sort of pattern. You know, you could start seasons slowly before then, but Chelsea had got all the money and you couldn't afford to slip up. So United had to start strongly. And it was such an emphatic statement. And some of the goals were breathtaking. And it just felt like, I know we'd won the League Cup the season before, but that was the moment when it felt like this is the start of a new United cycle. It was unbelievable, that game. Let's talk about transfers then, Phil. Before we talk about, we'll move on to a couple of other topics. Obviously, we are going to preview Wolves as well, but let's talk about the transfers overall in terms of what we've done. I think it's been another fairly ruthless summer. I thought Ten Hag was ruthless last summer, to be fair. I thought he did a lot of activity that was as ruthless as you could expect, because I think throughout the season what he's done is he's been fair to all the players he's kept around. Everyone can say, apart from Van der Beek, but he could probably say that over his career at United, he has had a fair go at it. He's just not up to it for whatever reason. It's not right for him. Everyone else has had a really fair go at it. Everyone had fair running the team. They've had a fair chance to show what they can do. But when Ten Hag's made decisions, he's been so swift and so decisive about it that no one can really complain because he hasn't left people in the dark. There's been no stringing along. It's been swift. It's been decisive. That players had the option to contribute and play the way back into. I mean, Maguire, for example, has had lots of chances. All of the midfield had plenty of chances. The chance was there for them to grab an opportunity and play their way back into form. And Ten Hag has been fair all the way through. And this summer he's been exactly the same way. I mean, some of the players have moved on already. A fair amount. More than your average share, I would have thought, the way that he's gone through. And he's dealt with the incoming players. They're clearly the players that he wanted to bring in, and now he's got those three in. He's sort of now making moves for those players to go out to make room for any late additions in the window, which I really think is as well. I know the takeover talk is one thing, and that hopefully should be sorted at some point. Regardless of that, in keeping with the conditions that he's had, I think he's done everything as well as we could expect. And I'm talking the timing of the moves and the personnel in terms of the people who come in and the people who wants to move on. I think he's got everything bang on so far. And Robbie's just posted here that Howard Nurse is just saying that Fred's gone, the confirmation of that, because he was close to move to Fenerbahce. And I don't think, again, anyone's going to say that he hasn't had his chance. Phil, what would you rate the transfer market for United?
I agree totally with you, Wayne. I think, as you say, he's acted really swiftly, and the signings that we have brought in are really good additions. I think, firstly, you look at Mason Mount coming in nice and early. I think he bolsters the midfield. I knew there was going to be a couple of players, moving on, and I think obviously the way Ericsson sort of finished the season, I knew that maybe we needed, to strengthen that area. I think Mount obviously may not have had the best pre-season in terms of, output, in terms of goals and assists or anything. But I think for me, what he will bring is a lot of energy. He's different to sort of the players that we've had previously. I think he can carry the ball. And I think for me, once he starts bedding in and finding his feet a little bit more, we will see the best of him. The keeper situation, obviously sad to see De Gea go in the way that he did. I think obviously it was the right time for me. I think the goalkeeper situation needed addressing, and bringing Onana in now, I think is a step forward. I think his distribution and the way he sort of commands his box in terms of acting as a sweeper, and he can distribute the ball really well, and he's comfortable, will just make us a lot more settled, and he'll have that calming effect, hopefully, on the defenders, and being able to set attacks off as well from deep positions. I think he's got great balls that he can ping out. The only sort of shadow on that is maybe looking at obviously how we will deal with some of the more physical elements of the Premier League, and balls into the box. That kind of thing. Obviously, you got lobbed against Lens the other day, which can happen. I don't think it's something that we need to get worried about. I think that's the way he plays, and you've got to give credit to the lad. It was a great finish. It was our mistake, and sometimes that can happen when you play the way he does. But I think obviously he's a great signing, and that will 100% improve us. And then obviously you look at Højlund, the young lad who's came in as the striker. For me, obviously a great signing for the future. Got a lot of potential. Not really seeing abundances of footage and games of him, but what I have seen, I do like. I think he's obviously, as I say, young. He's hungry. He looks like he's the type of player that Ten Hag wants. And yeah, I think obviously when he does get himself fit and in the team, hopefully he can hit the ground running. My only concerns are with obviously bringing him in is it's going to be a lot of pressure. This is why obviously I was sort of banging the drum about maybe taking Kane on a late deal and bringing that in, and I think that would have been the sort of cherry on the cake for me. Just in terms of it takes a bit of pressure off Højlund. You've got two centre forwards that you can sort of rely on. You've got guaranteed goals. And I think the way that sort of someone like a Harry Kane potentially would have suited us really well. The way he drops in, and you've got your likes of Rashford and Garnacho making them runs in behind. I think that would have been a brilliant addition for us. However, we've seen stranger things. I don't know whether last the scene he was, Bayern Munich's player, but obviously we've seen with Caicedo, with the Liverpool deal, things have happened there, and maybe there is potential for United to bring in another striker. But yeah, I think overall at the minute with what's happened, the ingoings and outgoings are looking really good. And yeah, looking forward to the start of the season.
Yeah, Robbie says, and it is right, just double checked. No, that I doubt you, Robbie. He says United just announced the Fred transfer as well, which it'll be a shame but the right move for him for United. I think about time. I don't think he let anyone down at United, and I think, if anything, I can remember a long time, Mourinho brought him in and never really played him, and then it was left to Solskjaer to find a role for him, and he did. I mean, that were the midfielders until Casemiro came in, was probably the best of the bunch that we had. All right, not always consistent and not always the best on the ball, but until Casemiro, I was probably the best of those bunch in there. So wish him the best. Obviously, a great character to have around, and obviously well liked at the club. Popular guy. So I want to ask you about the transfer activity as well, in terms of the dilemma that it presents for the young players, because everyone gets enamored by what's going on and the merry-go-round and who's going to come in and who's going to go out, and the players who are there, particularly those who go on tour, they're left with this opportunity to kind of impress. Obviously, there were a bunch of lads who played on in a couple of those friendlies who probably won't expect to be around the first team, but a couple of them will. Kobbie Mainoo being the best example of this, but obviously he picked up an injury in one of the pre-season games. Ten Hag said before he was going to keep him around and not send him on loan. I'm just wondering from your point of view, I was going to use Lee as an example here, because he just won the Youth Cup. And remember, we signed Hine maybe a year after, when he was hopefully looking to make that breakthrough into the first. But I can use you as a comparison as well, because around the time that you were sort of, you'd had your injury and you were coming back, and we had this period where we signed Sahar in January, we signed Smith in May, and then we signed Rooney in August, and we already had Van Nistelrooy there, and Solskjaer as well. We had all these players that's playing these forward positions, and all right, that's part of the process of what comes with being United. I'm just wondering, from a youngster's point of view, who's been preparing for the new season, and they're hearing all these names come in, and obviously there can be exciting times for these players coming in. Is it disheartening somewhat for the kids? I'm trying to remember an early example of a season of a player getting an opportunity after doing well on pre-season, and the one that springs to mind is Fraser Campbell in 2007, but that was because Ronaldo was suspended. I think Rooney was either suspended or injured for a little bit, and he hadn't signed Tevez, so Campbell was actually, he had a run of games in there, and all right, he was in there as a sort of make weight until those other players came in, but it was an opportunity. You would hope when Mainoo comes in, it's not just because Casemiro's out or something, that he's getting proper time to play alongside these players. And from a young player's point of view, Phil, are they likely to be thinking, when seeing players coming in, are they hoping that someone's not going to come in so that they get a chance?
I think it's a bit of a mixture of emotions, really. Just thinking back, when you're involved maybe in a pre-season tour, or you've got a bit of a sniff and you're training with the first team every now and again. I think the only thing really you can do, from a personal point of view, is train as hard as you can. You've got to always sort of, leave everything out there and just do the best that you can, and just hope that that is deemed good enough, or you're always hoping, really. I mean, it's difficult being at a club like Man United and any other of the top clubs. They've got the disposal to bring in a conveyor belt of players, and usually it's world class players, from around the world. So as a young player, it is quite disheartening at times, because you're thinking, no matter what I do, no matter how well I play, no matter how many goals I've scored in the reserves or whatever, there's always going to be somebody else who's coming in, or next in line, if you like. So it is a little bit of a difficult one. But I think the only thing, as I said, you can do is you've just got to keep working hard. You've still got to keep, showing up well in if it's the reserves or whatever it is, and have the right attitude. You've got to. I think that's the biggest thing, really. A lot of managers and a lot of clubs look at the younger players and think, who's the ones who are, just keep knuckling down, not letting anything phase them. They're still putting the effort in, whether it's with the 23s or whether it's with the training with the first team. Their attitude's spot on away from the club, the way they, conduct themselves around the club, and they are as people. And I think you've got to be sort of the full package, really, to sort of get that opportunity and warrant that, chance of maybe getting in the first team. And again, it is a little bit of luck at times. You maybe need someone to get injured, or maybe someone to sort of get sold, and then they're a little bit light in that position, and you may get an opportunity. I think that's a massive part of football, especially being at one of the top clubs. You always need that little bit of luck. I mean, you look at Marcus Rashford when he sort of stepped in when I think Martial got injured in the warm up. He probably wouldn't have played that game. Would that have happened? And he's took his opportunity. He's come into the first team, and I think he scored two, didn't he, against Arsenal?
Yeah.
Am I right in saying that? Yeah. And then that was the making of him, and he never looked back. And sometimes that little bit of luck, or that rub of the green, whatever you want to call it, is what you need as a young player. And I think, especially at the top clubs, the opportunities are few and far between. Whereas the lower you go down, there's always more chance of you getting in or getting an opportunity because the budget's not there. They can't have players coming in every transfer window, that kind of thing. So it's difficult, and you've just got to, as I say, you've just got to be strong, and as I say, you've just got to keep working hard and hope that opportunity does come. I think there, as you said, there is a couple of lads there who you've mentioned. Manu, I think obviously Palestri for me is one who I think now is maybe leapfrogged some of the other players, Sancho and people. I think if I'm Ten Hag and I'm looking at who do I want on the bench to come on and change a game, or make an impact off the bench, I think Palestri's overtook Sancho for me at this moment in time, going off the back end of last season, and what I've seen in pre-season. I think he looks as though when he comes on, or when he's got an opportunity, he looks to have the bit between his teeth, and he looks more positive, and he will drive with the ball and commit people and look to make things happen, which again, that is what you want from whether it's a young player or if it's a seasoned pro. That at the end of the day, I think this manager's proven now that no matter who you are, where you've come from, how much money you cost, if you're not producing and you're not performing, he doesn't care, and he won't bat an eyelid at dropping you or not putting you in the squad or moving you on, because I think he's ruthless and he just wants the best for the club and Man United.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and that's refreshing, and also fair play to the club for giving him the backing to do that, because let's say Mourinho, for example, didn't have that backing at a crucial window. Ten Hag has had it. He's making the decisions, like even if the player costs a lot of money, and it's just for example, Maguire moving him on, Fred moving him on for relatively small fees, but just moving it on so United can make a clean break, and the players as well, so they can start to rebuild the career and hopefully feel more positive about things. A lot of questions coming in from Jay in particular. I'll just get to a few of them. First of all, he said Hannibal is amazing. I think he'll break in with Kobe. Hopefully, I mean, I know a couple of Birmingham fans have talked about Hannibal and wondering whether or not that's his level, and he's got such talent. I'd like to see him get a chance. I would like to see him get a chance, but I'm not sure about the top level of the Premier League. Kobe's got a different kind of temperament. I think he really seems to suit that, and playing a different number of midfield roles, whereas Hannibal, what I mean by Minu is he's present, and he's wanting the ball and shouting for the ball, and you don't always get that with many midfielders, really. It's a difficult position to play, and you sort of praise that. He says about any news on Greenwood. Now, I'm not going to throw Phil under the bus with this one. I said this on Monday's podcast as well. We're not avoiding the topic of Greenwood. I know that there was a statement put out today by a group of the Women Supporters Coalition or something like that. I haven't looked that much into it because I've been writing all day. I just glanced on Twitter and I saw that something was gaining some traction. Club haven't made an announcement, and I don't want to be putting anyone in a position, and I don't want to put myself in a position where we're speculating over something that might or might not happen. So we'll comment on it once the decision's been taken and what we think. And I think that's the fairest way to deal with it.
That's the best way. I think wait for the club to announce what they've got to announce, and then we can have our say on that afterwards. I don't think it's fair really to comment anything beforehand. As you just say, I agree with you. When it's best to leave it.
So we do have a comments about Todibo. Robbie says, it's all about, Jay saying how many realistic signings do you think United are going to make? Any surprise signings? And so Robbie said Todibo, apparently United have got scouts at the game. Jay says he's at the peak and other follows. No, Pavard for me. So they're the two that have been mentioned, aren't they? Pavard and Amrabat is the other one, the midfielder that might come in from Fiorentina. I really don't know. I think that the first thing to say is that I think the 3 players that he's got so far, 10 out of the key targets that he's wanted. I'll answer this one quickly for you, Robert. Will you watch City tonight? No. Let's get back to the signings. Amrabat and possibly Pavard. What do you reckon, Phil? Obviously, there are a couple of areas. If we are going to move on a lot of these players in the next couple of weeks, there will probably be a couple of senior positions short, so you would expect a couple of moves. But it does look, at least from the signs of it, like an Amrabat and like a Pavard. Whether or not we think they're the right person or not, it looks at least that there won't be panic signings, that they're players who have been identified quite early on.
Yeah, I like Amrabat. I think he had a really good World Cup. I think he would certainly be a good addition. Pavard. I mean, I like the lad from City. From Palace. The young lad. I don't know how you pronounce his name. Is it Gay or Guy? The one who's the lad who's been involved with England. I think he's a really good player. I think obviously losing Maguire. Maybe the manager would look at bringing maybe another defender in. I think he's a good up and coming talent and would fit the criteria really for what you'd be looking for. But yeah, as you say, I think the 3 signings that we have made are good signings, and as you've said, we're not rushing into anything and going for anyone that's not right for the club. As I say, another couple of additions would be good, but I'm happy with the way that we've conducted our business and we've gone about things in the transfer market so far. The only little bit of a downside for me was obviously I was really hoping for a Harry Kane, just to really I mean, I'm optimistic this year, don't get me wrong, and I think we are going to have a good season. I think if Harry Kane would have signed, I think that puts us right in the mix on all fronts, because you know exactly what you're going to get. And as I said, I think this young lad who's signed, this centre forward, is going to have a lot of pressure on him. He's not going to have a full pre-season because he's been injured. And when he does come in, obviously, Man United's number 9 is always going to be in the spotlight, and for him to hit the ground running straight away is going to be difficult. And if he does sort of have a little bit of a slow start, he's going to come under a lot of criticism, and how will he deal with that? And so I think, if we could have got someone like Kane through the door, would have took a lot of pressure off him. And as I say, you would have known exactly what he was going to get, and would have made us a lot more. It would have just give us that X factor that we have been missing. I think we've not had that number 9 for a numerous few seasons now, where you know exactly what you're going to get from the start of the season. When I'm thinking back to your Van Nistelrooy's, your Van Persie's, your Andy Cole's, you know exactly what you're going to get. 20, 25, 30 goals a season, and that ruthless efficiency in the final third, which I think last year obviously Rashford stepped up to the plate, had a great season, and we're hoping that he can carry on with that and kick on and keep them numbers up. But it's still yet to be seen and yet to be proven that he can do that on a regular basis. So, as I said, that is the only little bit of a downer that I'm sort of putting on this transfer window so far.
Yeah, and if you're not signing Harry Kane, it's not necessarily a downer, because Harry Kane, do you know what I mean? It's a world class, one of the best strikers in the world. That moves on to talking about Wolves, who sacked the manager just before the game. And if you think that Wolves couldn't be any more frustrating to play against than they have been for the last few years, get them Bournemouth manager who likes to waste time as much as Wolves. So they say the average plays, I don't know, 40 odd, like 51 minutes or something of the ball being in play. If there are new rules for applying wasted time on the end, I'm not expecting to leave Old Trafford before midnight on Monday night. It's going to be grim if Gary O'Neill's past reputation's got anything to go by. Obviously, though, that all depends on the way that United start the game, because they might blow Wolves away earlier on. And you know what, Phil, I've been thinking about this, and obviously it's a bad thing that Højlund isn't fit to play. But at the same time, it's kind of like a little bit of an advantage, because Garnacho didn't play the back end last season. There was a couple of games that he missed out, and he was on the bench, wasn't he, for Wembley, and he didn't start the game. And it's like, oh, what are you going to do in terms of bringing him on? Obviously, Rashford is expected to be from the left if Højlund's going to play from the start, but Garnacho has to have that opportunity, and this is the best way to sort of do it, really. Give him in from the start, let him run, let him try and nail down that position and create a good problem for United to have, because what they need to have, what they haven't had, you said, like, they haven't had a dominating presence in the striker position, which is right, really. I know Ronaldo flirted with that, but in terms of like a long-term prospect there, United haven't had that for a long time, and now it looks like they've got options in terms of saying, well, we're not just hoping, like Martial, for example, we're not just hoping against hope that he's going to deliver something, and you're pinning your hopes on something that's not really a long-term prospect. Now you're looking at things where players are going to have to play themselves into the side. Like Sancho played some of the preseason as a false nine, and you're wondering whether or not he's going to play in those positions. Rashford is probably nailed on to start through the middle on Monday night, so that means Garnacho's pretty much nailed on to start from the left. And if you watched the Lawrence game, I'm sure you did, or you've seen the extended highlights of it, like I did as well, that Antony, Garnacho, and Rashford together were unbelievable, especially with Bruno pulling the strings, were unbelievable. They were flying, and if they're going to show that kind of form, then it is a really good problem for Ten Hag to have. So really, even though it's bad that Højlund's not playing, in a certain way, it's kind of like the best case scenario to start the season off with.
Yeah, no, I agree with that, because as you say, it'll hopefully give Garnacho a little bit of a run in the team. And you know, it's up to it. As I said, this is the same thing we've just been talking about. You know, like Rashford got his opportunity. You know, when Martial got injured, this could be now the real big opportunity for Garnacho to sort of, you know, grab it and keep his place and show why he should be in the team. For me, he's really exciting. I think I love his sort of no fear in the way he's just, you know, he'll drive past players and try and get to the byline and put balls in, and I like that. And I think that's what we've been lacking a little bit in the last couple of seasons. As we say, you know, the Sancho's and stuff, not saying they've not been playing well, but I think sometimes he's played within himself and not really sort of, you know, done what we was expecting in terms of, you know, the output and being aggressive in the final third, taking your man on, you know, getting past the man and just playing safe. And I mean, the modern game has changed a lot, and I know it's more about keeping possession and all that kind of thing, but I still like, you know, the old school way of, you know, as a winger, can you get past your full back and get to the byline, whip a ball in, you know, be positive, drive into the box, make him commit a foul and get your shots off. So hopefully the front three, as you say, you know, start the way that they sort of played the other day against Lons, and hopefully, you know, they can, you know, put a few goals away. I think it's a good game to start against Wolves. I think, you know, when you look at opening day fixtures, obviously they've got a new manager, which could have a different effect of what it might have. But I think in terms of a start to the Premier League season, you look at Wolves, I think this year they will struggle. They've lost a lot of players and they've not really made many signings. They haven't got that goal scorer anymore who you know, will score a lot of goals. Jimenez was that about 3 or 4 seasons ago. He's dried up, and I don't really think. I think last season I looked at some stats on Wolves. I think the top scorer was someone who was on like 4 or 5 goals per dent or something like that. So, you know, ideally you're hoping that we should, you know, get off to a good start there and you know, build confidence and try and take that into, you know, the coming weeks.
Yeah. Well, we'll be back next week to talk about that. Obviously, I'll be back with Dave and Paul on Monday to review the game. In fact, no, I won't this week because the game's on Monday. So actually, we are skipping this week. So it'll be Phil and I, and hopefully Lee, if he's not called away on another job. Next week to review the game, and we'll be previewing Spurs, won't we? Spurs is the next game, and you can imagine that Spurs without Harry Kane. In Phil's ideal world, we will have gazumped Bayern at the last minute, and we'll be talking about a gentleman's agreement to not play Harry at Spurs. I remember we did that when we signed Andy Cole, wasn't it? We signed Cole, and we said we wouldn't play against Newcastle, and then Mark Hughes got injured. And Cantona was suspended straight after, so Cole just had to leave on that. Anyway, that's history, like 30 years history, which is making me feel old. So I'm going to go and drown my sorrows of age. If you've enjoyed the show, please give us a rating or review on the podcast provider that you listen through. If you're listening, or if you're watching back on YouTube, give us a like and subscribe to the channel. Really, really appreciate it. And obviously this season as well, as you'll have noticed if you're listening on the audio broadcast, that we're now part of the TalkSport fan network, which, you know, Phil, Lee, myself, Dave and Paul, we all talked about at the start of the summer. We're all really buzzing to be involved in that. So you might be hearing us on other channels, the other fans as well. Appreciate everyone tuning in tonight, guys. Thanks for the questions. We'll be back next week. So stay safe, stay well, and thanks for listening and watching.